Verse of the day 14. He who calls you is faithful, who also will do it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 24. 1 Thessalonians is a letter written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Thessalonica, a young congregation facing persecution. Paul wrote to encourage them in their faith, reminding them of God's promises and calling them to live lives of holiness and hope. In this concluding verse, Paul reassures the Thessalonians that the God who called them to live for him is faithful to complete his work in them. This promise is both comforting and empowering, reminding believers that God's faithfulness guarantees the fulfillment of his purpose in their lives. This verse highlights two key aspects of God's character: his faithfulness and his power to fulfill his promises. He who calls you, God is the one who initiates the call to salvation and to a life of holiness and purpose. This call includes his guidance, provision, and love, setting a unique purpose for each believer. As faithful, who also will do it, God's faithfulness means that he does not leave his work unfinished. What he begins, he completes. This assures believers that God's promises are not just empty words; he has the power and commitment to accomplish them in our lives. In essence, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 24 reminds us that God is trustworthy and will fulfill his purposes in us, providing strength, guidance, and grace to complete the journey he has called us to. In Numbers chapter 23 verse 19, God is not a man, that he should lie. Has he said, and will he not do? This verse emphasizes God's faithfulness and dependability, much like the assurance given in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 24. In Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 9, know therefore that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant. God's covenantal faithfulness is a foundational aspect of his character, promising that he will fulfill what he begins. In Psalm chapter 138 verse 8, the Lord will perfect that which concerns me. This psalm echoes the message that God completes his work, providing a sense of peace and security. In Philippians chapter 1 verse 6, he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Paul reiterates God's faithfulness to finish what he starts, mirroring the promise in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 24. In 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 13, if we are faithless, he remains faithful, he cannot deny himself. This verse emphasizes that God's faithfulness is unchanging, even when we falter. In Hebrews chapter 10 verse 23, let us hold fast, for he who promised is faithful. The author of Hebrews encourages believers to trust in God's promises, affirming his faithfulness to fulfill his word. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 24 encourages believers to trust in God's unwavering faithfulness. For the church today, this verse is a source of confidence and peace, reminding us that God will complete the work he has begun in us. In a world where promises are often broken, God's faithfulness is a solid foundation. No matter how uncertain our path may seem, we can be assured that God will bring his purposes to completion in our lives. This verse also calls us to respond to God's faithfulness with perseverance, knowing that his strength will sustain us. As the church, we are invited to rest in God's promise to complete his work in us, knowing that he is faithful and trustworthy. God bless you and give you grace after grace.